the reason for this chat, this talk tonight is especially in the server, is really what got me like thinking about it a whole lot, and then I realized it's like a broader problem as well. We get new people who come in, and I know a lot of you've seen this. Those of you who've been here a long time, and then new people as well may have noticed it semi kind of recently, where people come in and say, you know, so-and-so thing that's kind of yikesy, and it gets a few eyeball emojis, and then mods have to go, hey, can we talk to you about that a little bit? Because what you're saying here is a little yikesy. And they go, oh, I didn't even know. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's like the problem, is that you're parroting this dog whistle. And they go, oh, I didn't even know that was a dog whistle. Or like, I want to say like a couple weeks ago, someone was like, what's a dog whistle? And so that's why the title of the VC is Why Dogs Bark. And our good friend Ryan says, you know, hey, you know, they may not be saying something racist, but the dogs sure are barking. And Ocean and I often laugh at Ryan when he says that. But I kind of wanted to go through a bunch of things. I saw actually on Facebook, the thing that like really sparked me into like, okay, this is something I want to do. On the Heathen Underground community on Facebook, they had like a big, well, what is a dog whistle in paganism? And well, that got me thinking, okay, well, if people don't even know what a dog whistle is, or like what the problem with fascism and heathenry is, then maybe we should start there for like the foundation. And so I actually wrote out quite a bit. And full disclosure, 100% upfront about this at the beginning. Contra Points did a fantastic video on this that I can link in the chat here in just one moment.
Got you.
You got it? Okay, cool. And I went through that video and wrote down a whole lot of stuff from the video. So if you like listen to this and then go listen to Contra Points video, you'll go, oh yeah, he just kind of like wrote down a lot of what Contra said. And well, yeah, I did 100%. Not ashamed to say that, because Contra has a great way of writing everything out in a digestible way. And so I strongly recommend you guys go watch that video later. Don't watch it now. Listen to what I have to say now, and then you can go watch Contra later.
If I just leave
yeah, bye.
Points video and you're done.
Definitely put that in your watch later though, because it's totally worth it. Contra Points, if you just type in like Contra Points racism or Contra Points fascism, she has a lot of awesome content in there. So strongly recommend. So to get started, let me go to my notes where I wrote down the big thing that you kind of want to start with is, what is a fascist and what do they believe? And as you guys can see, the first image here, what fascists believe is that the people of European heritage are or ought to constitute biological, cultural, and political unity known as, quote, the white race, sometimes dog whistled as Western culture. And then the second thing is that Jews are masterminding the destruction of the white race through multiculturalism and non-white immigration, quote unquote, the white genocide or ethnic replacement. And then 3, the only way to save the white race is to establish a white homeland or ethno-state from which non-whites and degenerates must be purged. So those are all like really fucking bad, right? Like if they were to just say that out loud, which a few of them do, but if they were to just say that out loud, like holy fuck, they probably wouldn't be as prevalent as they are now, right? Like even the most enlightened centrist would go, hey, that's not right. Can we not do that maybe? Like maybe? So they have to come up with this system, and that system is dog whistles. And the name implies well, they're trying to whistle to their fascist buddies. And it's a really good code way to get around being called out for being not good, you know? So, if you want to recognize a fascist, you have to be familiar with fascist dog whistles, because the majority of the time, a fascist will disavow fascism and white supremacy, at least when talking to those who are non-fascists. Fascists are more likely to gain traction when being more subtle than over that which makes them more dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, if they were out and, like I said, if they were out and out fascists, they would be kind of like shouted down pretty quickly. But when they're really sneaky about it, that's when they're dangerous. So there's 9 steps here that I've gotten written out from Contra, and I'm just going to kind of go through them point by point. Ocean, you can step in at any time if you want to add anything to this. Do you have anything you want to add before I get started?
No, I think you're covering it really well. It's just the thing to highlight, which you already said, really, is that a lot of times fascists are like, they will say among their own groups that they're running a covert operation, basically, kind of like a psyop,
right,
sort of thing. And this is something Contra points out in her video, that she wishes the left could figure out how to do this, because they're fascists tend to be much better at working together than people that oppose fascists. So
absolutely,
yeah. So just keep it in mind that, like, when looking for dog whistles, you wind up kind of feeling yourself going a little nuts. Just realize it's like, no, but people are actually doing this, right? Like the hidden messages that you're seeing aren't always the thing, but they often enough are that it's frustrating. So anyway,
yeah,
that's the reason why when we see one, it's like, okay, we got to suss this out.
yeah, right? We got to talk about this now.
Right.
Because
you
can't just let it sit.
We don't want any of that shit running around in our community.
Right.
So it's good to have like hey, this is specifically what we're looking for.
Right.
When we're having these conversations.
So the first step that they like to use is outright denial. Never be honest about their positions, and they hide them at all costs. Another way that they talk about this is hiding their power level. There is actually an image I wanted to show real quick. Let me open the original here. It's super blurry. I know. It's a freaking 4chan screenshot. Sue me. Let's see if I can zoom in on it. I might not be able to. Nah, it just makes it worse. But, the big thing, this post was made in 2017, so we're actually right at past 4 years ago that this post was made.
Right after the
yeah, it's literally right after Charlottesville, and it was like the whole point of it. Charlottesville was like a big turning point for fascists and Nazis. They realized they couldn't do that. They can't just go and do that anymore, because it drew like a lot of sympathy. It drew them a lot of ire and a lot of sympathy towards those that are affected by Nazis and fascists. By like they're centrists. They're really after centrists, like constantly trying to pull people off of that fence and over onto their side. So the Contra showed this image and then went through some of these points here. But before I really get started, I actually want to show this image. Now, there's some bad words that I've blanked out here. Disavow this language, but this just shows you. This is from 1981, Lee Atwater, Republican Party strategist, in an anonymous interview. You start out in 1954 by saying these bad words. By 1968, you can't say the bad word. That hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like force busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. You're getting so abstract now that you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is that blacks get hurt worse than whites. Like, that's the whole point of these dog whistles and the point of, like, the GOP, basically. Hardcore conservatives, alt-right people are trying to push policies and strategies to hurt anybody that's non-white. It's like the whole point. So to get around that, they outright deny, they never be honest about their positions, and they hide them at all costs. However, them claiming not to be fascist shouldn't mean anything if they still act like fascists, repeat fascist talking points, and hang out with fascists. Now, how many people lately do we know that just hang out with fascists way too much, but then want to say, oh no, I'm not like them, I'm just an enlightened centrist. I'm just happen to have a lot of fascists at my table. That's a really, really big one. And that's why I like that it's number one. Because it really highlights the problem of the company that you keep can really tell where your own morals and ethics are. If you're okay, it's that old adage of, if you've got 10 centrists and a Nazi at a table, and then you've got 11 Nazis at that table. And there's no way that you should be okay with sitting with somebody like that. It's very, very telling. Point number 2 is the euphemism, and I feel like this is probably like the biggest one, period. Fascists use this strategy a lot to continuously seem to shift their positions to avoid the negative repercussions of identifying with known problematic movements or groups. When people figure out what they mean, it just gets, like, all they have to do is just move a little bit. And so, to give you like an example, of course I'm not a fascist. I'm an alternative ethno-nationalist, simply trying to preserve Western values. All right, that's still pretty bad. Like, we figured out that that means something bad, right? And so now that turns into, I'm not a white nationalist, I'm an identitarian. I know a lot of people who self-identify as an identitarian. It's still fascist. It's still white supremacist. And it just continues from there. As soon as identitarian becomes the bad word, they'll find a new label, and many of them do and probably have. The same thing that goes for like their core beliefs, preserving the homeland for white people. Sounds bad, right? How about preserving Western culture and civilization? We hear that in the fucking media all the time. We just have to preserve Western values. We have to preserve Western culture. And it goes down a little bit easier for a lot of people. Western genocide becomes ethnic replacement. And then purging non-white people from their country and communities becomes purging immigrants, terrorists, criminals, and rapists. And they leave it to the audience to pick up on the color coding. I know you guys hear that in the news a lot. Ocean, do you have anything you want to add on these 2 points?
No, I'm still chilling. I think that you're doing really well.
All right, cool. Number 3 is pedantry. To give you a quote, "It's absurd to call me a Nazi. The German National Socialist Party hasn't existed since 1945. And just for those of you who watched the community video that I put together of denouncing racism, how many comments did you guys see say that? Because I counted about 3 at least. That those words exactly. I'm not a Nazi. There are no Nazis. Nazis haven't existed since 1945. We beat them. That's pretty fucking stupid, right? Selective pedantry is meant to dodge criticisms and avoid derogatory labels, and to bog you down in semantical dispute. So, like, let's say you're trying to nail them down on something, they dodge and say, oh no, I'm not a Nazi. It's meant as a diversion tactic to get you away from the point that got you to call them a Nazi in the first place. To give you an example, I'm not a white supremacist. I just think we deserve a land of our own, as do all people. Or, I think Asian people have the highest IQ, so you could say, I'm an Asian supremacist. And now you're having to argue about IQ, and not the main goal of his fascist politics of promoting white people being above all other people, or white supremacy. It all circles back to that. Number 4 would be secret symbols. And so...
Wolf,
Yes.
are any of the slides supposed to change?
No, not yet. I haven't gotten to them yet.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for reminding me, though.
Yeah, a couple people were asking.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to them yet. We're about to, though.
Slide into that next slide.
I know, right? I didn't think about slides until about 30 minutes ago, and I was like, oh, I should save these and show them. I'll gather some more stuff for whenever I throw the video together.
I think you can just keep adding to this, because I think we're going to be doing this more than once. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll have to. All right, so number 4 is secret symbols. And this one is one that we as pagans deal with like fucking constantly, right? It's probably the most broad. Things like the black sun, the winged Othala, and the swastika are super obvious. But there are other small ways, like secret handshakes and gestures, like the hijacked OK symbol, and that used to be an innocent kids game, and now it's used to signal to other white supremacists. Symbols like these can be frustrating to try and educate others on, because if you try to educate them, then you start to come off sounding a little bit crazy, and they begin to dismiss you. And that's kind of their whole point, fascists. Their whole point. They want to make you come across as ridiculous by trying to point this out. Things like the OK sign are not inherently fascist, but the fact that they have other more broadly known meaning is the point that they get to be used with impunity until too many people catch on, and then the symbol can be dropped and a new one can be hijacked. And then this sets the stage for step 5, strategy of the accused. So to give you a quote, the left accuses everyone of racism, and they call everyone who's a white person racist. If they will attack and censor me, they will come for you next. So I know that we have all seen the overzealous Twitter user call anyone who disagrees with them like a Nazi or a white supremacist. I know I've witnessed it firsthand, but those instances are extremely few and far between. But it does cause centrists and liberals to become aligned with fascists. I'm sorry, it doesn't cause centrists or liberals to become aligned with fascists, but it does accelerate the process. And fascists will use this to their advantage to get ahead of it and use it as a sympathy draw. And then number 6 is jokes, memes, satire, and irony. We've all heard people say, I wasn't being racist, it was a joke. It was just a joke, lay off. What, you can't take a joke? We've all seen this a billion times. The fascist Nazi sincerely says something abhorrent, and then when they're called out on it, they mock their accuser for not being on the up and up about the newest meme or internet joke. They could just be joking, or they could be hiding behind the irony to conceal the truth, and it's difficult to tell the difference, and that's the point. Kekistan is actually a great example of this. It was originally founded by centrist YouTubers. Let me open this up here. So it was originally founded by centrist YouTubers as a satire of the civil rights movement of a fake nation that just happens to use Nazi-style battle flag. So those tweets are kind of stupid. But it became the perfect ironic pretext for identitarians. We all know this guy, right? It became the perfect pretext, ironic pretext for identitarians, including ones who led the rally, where an ironic shitposter memed his car into a crowd of people. And so the SPLC now claims it as a hate symbol, and then the Nazis get to just scoff it off as a joke. And that helps delegitimize some of the claims by the SLPC. I'm sorry, SPLC. So ADHD and dyslexia, yay. But yeah, if they can point to one thing going, guys, that's just a joke, that was just a meme. Well, they can then do that with a couple of other symbols and dog whistles as well, can't they? And so, number 7 is shifting blame. Whataboutism is huge here. What about the anti-white organizations? Why aren't they being called out by the media and the woke mob? You know those organizations like Black Lives Matter and Antifa? The idea that there's an equivocation between fascist violence and anti-fascist efforts and white nationalism and black civil rights. The implication that activism to reduce violence against impoverished areas, or that it's just the same as anti-fascist efforts to stop white supremacy from spreading. Remember Trump calling out Antifa and the alt-left on national television? It was said to distract liberals and centrists into thinking that there is an alt-left equivalent of the alt-right. Both sides' rhetoric is very dangerous, and I know you've all seen me call that out in the server as recently as this past week, as it diverts attention away from the fascists and abusers in power and vilifies anti-fascists and those who would try to fight back against their oppressors. And it helps gain sympathy from centrists and shifts the Overton window of acceptable discourse in their direction, the direction of the fascists. Number 8 is incrementalism. To give you a quote, "You don't have to support a white ethno-state to want common sense immigration policies. Of course I don't support violence against the white people, against non-white people. But we do have a right to preserve our boundaries in our culture, don't we?" So, perception manipulation is a huge strategy here. The attacks on non-white people are just a defense of white culture and people. The white ethno-state that they want to have, it requires an ethnic cleansing of some form. But they won't say that out loud. So they have a list of incremental goals that starts with no non-white immigration. If they can whip up enough racist sentiments using phrases like thugs, criminals, not sending their best, refugees not contributing enough to society or the economy, they can then later turn that same hate against the non-white people who are already here. Number 9, free speech. Quote, "You may not like it, but this is my right to say it." A big part of anti-fascist activism is limiting the fascists' ability to recruit and intimidate, often by shutting down marches and rallies, and pressuring platforms not to host fascists at their events. They then oppose that strategy. Sorry, hold on. So then the fascists then oppose that strategy by falling back on the defense of free speech. Fascists do not actually value freedom or democracy. You can give them their freedoms, and they will turn around and strip you of yours the first chance that they get. They don't care about the diversity of opinions, the free marketplace of ideas, is a tool for them to use against you, the anti-fascists, and to gain sympathy from the centrists. So, why do these work? The hidden layers of innuendos are there to help hide the real meaning, much like an adult joke layered into a kid's cartoon that goes right over little Timmy's head while the parents chuckle to themselves. This makes people not wise to fascist dog whistles easy to exploit and be inadvertently spreading around fascist memes and talking points without realizing it. And then they're shocked when leftists who do recognize them start dogpiling them in comment sections. It creates a smoke screen in which almost anyone can look like a fascist, and this is what they want. They want you looking over your shoulder and coming off as the paranoid leftist who sees a fascist in every shadow. Let me give you an example here. This was posted by the ACLU National Verified Twitter page. This is the future that the ACLU members want. Blonde hair, kid, free speech, American flag. That looks like a fucking dog whistle, doesn't it? Here, let me give you some comparisons. That looks nearly identical. But it's from the ACLU. They're not out here dog whistling. Not on purpose. And so it really does create a lot of problems for us as we try to navigate this scene.
Pause real quick.
Yo.
It seems like some people are saying they can't see it, and I think it's because I think that when you stream on Discord, it has a limit of 50.
Yeah,
right?
it does. Yeah.
Yeah, so some of us can't see the.
Here, I'll post them in
Yeah.
chat. I'll post them in
I was
chat.
gonna say take a screenshot or something and post it in
here.
chat.
I got them right here.
Because like a lot of what Wolf's covering right now is in Contra Points' video. In fact, if you watch Contra Points' video, you'll probably be like, oh,
So
Wolf
here's
posted almost exactly the same thing.
if you
And
take a look in VC, here's
Wolf
from
acknowledged, that's true.
yeah, here's the ACLU picture.
I think these screenshots are from Contra Points.
They are,
video,
yes,
right?
100%. Everything that I have here is from ContraPoints video. So that picture looks pretty yikesy, right? Especially when you compare it to, oh no. I tried to post the other picture, and for those of you who can see it, Discord said that it's explicit content.
Which one?
The other one that I tried to send. We must secure the existence of our race and our future for white
I'm
children.
Sure that
14
Discord's
words.
Figured out.
Yeah.
Because Discord became like this alt-right hideout for a little while, and it still kind of is. But I'm sure that the devs at Discord are figuring out ways to make sharing memes harder.
Yeah.
In explicit places.
So for the 50 of you who know the comparison, Discord won't even let me post the more yikesy one that shows the comparison. For those 50 of you who know that, that should tell you something. Isn't that funny? And it is rad that Discord can do that. But it also has been annoying. Like, I tried to show proof that old fuckface, what's his name? The white supremacist in the UK. Super popular.
Which one?
Survive the Jive.
Survive the Jive. I tried to show that Survive the Jive has fucking Nazi symbol tattooed on his chest, and they wouldn't let me post
That
it.
picture of him was explicit.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me post it. It said it was explicit. So I had to upload it somewhere else and link it back to the server so that people could see it. So that was my opening right there for Foundation. I wanted to lay that groundwork while Ocean and I move forward, covering more pagan-based stuff that we deal with in the community, that seems to come up quite a bit. It's pretty frustrating just how much there is. Ocean, do you want to start with yours, or do you want me to kind of start off with mine?
I don't have that link up right now. Hold on.
Okay. Here, I'll start with mine, and you dig that link up because I know you've got
Yeah,
it
I know I sent it to
semi-handy.
you a while ago.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, what am I fucking thinking? It's in the
I believe it's in the server, right?
yeah, it's in the announcements or somewhere. Hold on a minute. Oh, where did I put it?
Go check your WhatsApp. Just scroll up a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
So for those of you, if this is a video later, the link will definitely be in the description. But I have some handwritten stuff. I went through a few threads that were talking about dog whistles and whatnot, and there's some things that you can look out for, and I'm just gonna roll a few of them off, and we can dive into them individually. Ocean and I will together if you guys want to. Ocean if you want to. And so the biggest one that we kind of all should know by now is the Folkish. Folkish in paganism is a dog whistle. And it's a dog whistle for white supremacy, for blood ties to European heritage, saying that you should drink from your own well, which is another phrase. That's a phrase, a big dog whistle. But it comes from the word Volkisch, which was used a lot back in 1940s. Another one would be Odinist, which you would think like that wouldn't be one. That's one that kind of gets away a little bit. Those who know, like really know, but those who don't have any idea, I've known some really decent people claim to be an Odinist, thinking it just means that they hold Odin to a really high regard, and that's not what it means. It's basically just Christianity, but with Odin. They end up disregarding most of the other gods, if not all of the other gods. And it's just a giant white supremacist circle jerk. I really, except for like two people, and both of those people, we were able to be like, hey, you should probably put that term down, because this is the company you keep. Which is a conversation that we should have in a minute, putting terms down because of the company you keep by holding them. But
Made a couple of points about that in my videos about people that don't even want to use the word asatru
right,
because of the Asatru Folk Assembly, and that I don't mind the use of asatru, especially when being used to reference like Icelandic heathenry, right? But it does, like, I also very much understand people that want to like put the term away. So I'm seeing stuff in the chat too. So anyway, go ahead.
yeah. The other one I wanted to kind of zero in on, like putting down terms. For those of you who can click fast enough, I'm going to stream this Twitter post I made the other day. I said, I think it might be time for pagans to retire the word folk when speaking in a spiritual sense. I'm Southern. I say folks all the time. But when I'm talking about my spirituality and paganism, folk is the last word I'll use. It's tainted and too hard to separate right now. And I'm referring specifically to those who say, gather the folk. Huge dog whistle. Which just means gather the white people. Gather the folk from Europe. The white people.
So I do want to piggyback on that because
Yeah.
it's with respect to the guy that is most famous for saying that, Wisdom of Odin. He's been asked about that, and he explicitly says it's not what he means. But you know, it's the dog whistle has been pointed out to him, but he's ignored the dog whistle element and hasn't amended his phrasing at all, which is strange, right? Like when people say gather the folk, people immediately are going, okay, wait. People that know what they're looking at are like, wait, what do you mean by that? Do you realize that that's that kind of delivers this message to certain people, and that's been explained to him, and he hasn't changed it.
Right.
Which is one of the things that, like, even though if you ask him and investigate it with him and figure out what he's said about it, he'll say explicitly, no, I don't want that in my group. However, why not amend something that has been pointed out to you as being like, hey, this is a dog whistle for Nazis in your advertising, your marketing?
Right.
Oh, like, shouldn't you maybe want to avoid like a mantra that is a dog whistle, right? Like, but he seems to think either he holds a position that's malicious, and we can't know. Either he holds a position that's malicious, that is, I'll deny and pretend, or he falls into the useful idiot centrist category, right?
Right.
And where, like, people that are looking at WoO as being that are insidious are going, well, the people that are telling you to change your mantra are just wanting you to change so that they can control you, and you should stand against them, right? He,
Right.
like, that's that he is either knowingly advertising with a dog whistle, or has been convinced that it doesn't matter. But there isn't another option there.
Right. Someone in chat said, referencing my tweet, should the word be avoided altogether, the word folk? And I say no, and I actually clarify right here. I 100% clarified in some of my replies that I still say things like trans folk, also folk music, and even folk magic. There are traditions that have the word folk in them that are historical, they're ancient, and they're valid, and they don't have anything to do with white supremacy. But once you start referring to people in paganism as the folk, my folk, folkist, folk group, folk assembly, that's when I start asking questions.
It becomes a dog whistle because of Volkism, going back to the Nazis, right? Like, so if you're using in your advertising, in your labeling, something that is like heavily associated with Nazi movements, identitarian movements, etc., and people notice that, like, centrists don't notice it, but people that know what they're looking at do, and the people that know what they're looking at are the people looking out for it.
Right.
And the people looking out for it are either people that are aware that are trying to protect their communities from this, or people looking for those communities, i.e. Nazis.
Correct.
So, or fascists, like this, you can get into what the labeling is forever, right?
It's all
Because
it's all the
like
same to
moving
me.
around and changing it and turning into a chameleon.
Yeah, it's all the same to me.
Yeah, I mean, same, but like, you want to be exact with your wording and all this shit, but like, that's part of the frustration, is that, as we talked about earlier, there is a chameleon game happening. So, like, the people that are looking for those labels, and the people that make those labels to attract such people, WoO either fell into this or he maliciously created it. I'd be perfectly satisfied with the narrative that he unknowingly created a mantra that was attractive to white supremacists, but then didn't change it because he was convinced by people that this was that changing it was a way of controlling him or something like that, and that he shouldn't bow down to people. Same with his view on Declaration 127. That's a really fucking like centrist puppet, like useful idiot move, right? So, anyway, I think my point's been made.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to wrap up with this tweet here. Someone said, Volk, or folk, is Germanic. Perhaps you should find a Gaelic term you like more. And I just responded to it, correct, and the Volkish movement has corrupted the word to be synonymous with racism and bigotry in much of the world, from Europe to Scandinavia to Canada to South America to pretty much everywhere in the U.S. So, And I don't need to. I don't understand why they said find a Gaelic term. That was so stupid.
That sounds like a. I don't. There's protectionism suggestions around that kind of a statement. Anyway.
Another thing I wanted to go over. Someone said, "What is Odinism?" And we can bring up the page from the Odinic Rite. It's a heathen organization practicing a form of religion called Odinism, after the chief god of Norse mythology, Odin. It's a reconstructionist religious organization focusing on Germanic paganism, Norse paganism, and Anglo-Saxon paganism. Structure, politics. They are politically neutral. Values. They say they have the 9 noble virtues and the 9 charges, which were codified by the Rite's founders from the Havamal. The 9 noble virtues was written by a literal Nazi.
It has its roots going back to McNallen and other types that kind of worked with him on stuff. 9 noble virtues is one of those things that's been popularized that people will kind of see and kind of go, oh, okay, well, this is a summary. The thing with the 9 noble virtues is that people think they're ancient. They're not.
No, they were 80s, right?
70s or something like that.
Yeah,
70s or 80s.
It was late 70s, early 80s, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and but they were intended to be a summarization of the Havamal, but that was as seen by people with Nazi leanings in the early days of modern heathenry. If you go back far enough with modern heathenry, when you get into the early days of it, to like the late the 70s and then in the 80s, a lot of the characters that were promoting heathenry at the time, not all of them, but a lot of them were Nazi or Nazi adjacent or like some form of fascist. And this is something that we talked about in depth in our interview with Ryan Wolf on the Heathenry in America, Omnipotent Beard, right?
Right.
We kind of went into a lot of those things. There's like all these people that are Nazis, and then there's Diana Paxson.
Right. Thank the gods, right?
Like, trying really hard to like make a non-racist form of the religion, and while at the same time like operating within this community, and it's fucking stressful for her. So because she knew McNallen, right? But anywho, going back into that with the 9 noble virtues, the 9 noble virtues comes from this era of early heathenry, early modern heathenry, and it's one person's summarization of the Havamal. It's not like the Vikings went around saying that they were upholding the 9 noble virtues, right? It's just a modern colloquialism thing that honestly a lot of the people that use it are the same people that also deride things like they'll use the name Wicatru for eclectic heathenry. Any eclecticism within heathenry when also touting the 9 noble virtues, which winds up carrying a nice gigantic bag of irony along with it, because it's a modern creation. It's not something that's reconstructionist.
Absolutely. So I actually went to the Odinic Rite website after looking at the Wikipedia page. The Wikipedia page is pretty tame, but the main page of the OdinicRite.org main webpage here says the Odinic Rite is an international organization dedicated to the advancement of Odinism, a modern-day expression of the ancient indigenous beliefs of our northern Indo-European ancestors, drawing an ancestral wisdom from the dawn of our folk. The Odinic Rite is a unique denomination of Odinism. We do not consider the Viking Age to be the golden age of our people, but a part of the rich tapestry, which contributes to the history and wisdom of our history and wisdom.
To tell whether or not a group is a little racist.
Right.
This is one of the things that winds up popping out is when you see things like, what did it say? Indigenous European faith
Gosh,
or Native European
bless.
faith?
Yeah, that's one of the ones on my list as well.
Yeah, like that's like one way to find out whether or not you're dealing with like a racist organization or person is to get them to describe what heathenry is. And, you know, a lot of times we'll say it's like the worship of the old gods of Germania or something like that. That's usually fine. But as soon as they start saying like the native religion of Europe or some shit like that, or indigenous, as soon as they throw indigenous in there, it's like, oh, wait, hold on, tell me more.
Yeah, I was looking at their About Us section, and it's a lot of soft dog whistles. That homepage was definitely more dog whistly than the About Us part. It's still pretty stupid. They're stupid. Anybody who calls themselves an Odinist is supporting this. And that's why...
A lot of people don't know that. Like,
Yeah. I agree.
I met somebody long time ago, that said they were an Odinist. And I was like, cool, what is that? Like, this is before I was heathen.
Right.
And
it sounds right,
like,
right?
Oh, yeah, I worship Odin and these other gods and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
Some stuff. Looking back on that, knowing what I know now, I'm like, I don't think that person was racist fucking at all. I just think that
they didn't know any better.
They probably just thought that's what the name of the religion was, right? So
I've had to educate people and be like, I know two people that have put the word down.
In my heathenry, also true, or Norse pagan video, I should have done Odinist as well. I should have mentioned it in that video, but I didn't.
Just so you could laugh at it.
Stupid. But in the comment section of that video, that mistake of not including Odinist in the conversation wound up bitten me in the ass, probably in the form of about 100 or so comments of people trying to say, yeah, Odinist is another term. And I was like, I'm not correcting every single person in the fucking comment section about this, but holy shit, it shows that even in a video where I'm explicitly talking about the racism angle, you've got people that are going, oh yeah, Odinist too. There's a lot of ignorance around the term. And then not everybody that uses it is racist or supporting racism necessarily, right? Not at least not consciously. But then you go, oh wait, but if you look at all the organizations that say Odinist, what do they all share?
Right.
They all share these, like, some of them are even like, you know, they do, what is it? There's a Finnish group or something like that does like night neighborhood walks to protect against immigrants or some shit.
So,
like that's
crazy.
Where,
yeah
that's where that term goes.
Absolutely. Yeah, people are bringing up the Forn Sether. Who do we know that deals with?
Yeah, we know that guy, but Forn Sether is one that I find is spotty as far as whether or not it's like.
Well, remember he called his group something else. Remember, it was a different name, and then he rebranded.
I'm talking about the term.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say before he took on that name. Remember, we sat down and said, "Well, is heathenry what we want to call what we practice, or do we want to look at renaming what it is that we're doing here in America? Do we want to call it?"
That would have been a dumb idea.
Forn said, yeah, in hindsight, so fucking glad we walked away from that. We were like, well, this is what these words mean, the northern path, Forn Sether.
Well, no, it means our ancient faith.
Yeah, our ancient faith of the north or something like that.
But Forn Sether, it basically means old faith, old gods, or whatever the fuck.
Right.
And it's fine. Like, I haven't found a consistency about it. Like,
I haven't either.
Same with heathen, right? Heathen doesn't mean that you're not dealing with a fucking racist group.
Exactly.
Like, it just means they might not be, because they're not using an overt dog whistle.
Right.
But if you look at, like, you know, heathens of whatever, and I'm saying that so I don't accidentally name like an actual organization. But then you look at their subtext and it's like a native European faith, blah 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 blah, and it's like, oh no,
yeah,
no,
great.
fuck. Okay, we're dealing with that, right? So, yeah.
A big one that you and I get in our comment sections both is them claiming to be Folkish and then accusing us of being Universalists. That's a really big dog whistle.
So, can I just rant?
Yeah,
about that?
do it, please.
All right,
That's what we're here for.
So, there is a trichotomy that has been developed within heathen culture, in especially in America, where there's this delineation between universalist, tribalist, and folkist, right? And folkist is, you know, if you're not white, you can't participate in the religion. Universalist is anybody can participate in the religion, and tribalist is this like supposed to be this middle ground of like, well, you know, there's ancestor veneration that is important, and maybe you should know a few things before you really practice heathenry,
Right.
and all this other crap. And it's meant to be like this attempt at being a reasonable compromise,
Right.
to say that, well, universalists is, we don't think that everybody should be just be able to practice willy-nilly. We're not including you know, these wild Norse pagan people that are basically some other they're not like recognizably reconstructionist, but they just like are basically Wiccans that venerate Thor or something like that, right? Like, are we including that? Is that part of the universalist umbrella? No, so we're going to go with tribalist, right? And so my particular opinion on that whole fucking thing is that tribalist and universalist are essentially great ways of getting the people that aren't focused to argue with each other over dumb shit that isn't important to the actual discussion that's being had, right? It winds up being like gatekeeping over who's done the most research, or
Right.
like this other kind of crap. Instead, what should be focused on, this is the reason why I do this, it's focused, not focused.
Correct.
So, all right, wait, do you have these signs of focus? So, and this is what the running around in philosophy bro debate world has taught me, is that if you're going to build like distinctions, the best way to do it is to go, you're either part of this identifier or you're outside of this identifier. Focused. What is focused? Have a clear idea of what you mean by that, which definition provided in my video about folkism. Same with Eliakai, same with you. Where there's a clear idea of what we mean. Do you fit that or do you not? And if you don't, all right, fine, you're not a focus. But if you do, now you're the problem. We've identified it. Whether or not tribalist or gatekeeping about research and any of this other crap that winds up like perpetuating the toxic bullshit that heathens wind up getting into arguments with each other about, move all that shit aside. We're concerned right now about focused or not. And the rest, we can kind of talk amongst ourselves in more nuanced conversations without using labels to divide ourselves, right?
Correct.
There's my rant.
It was a good rant. And I agree with you. Another one is, and this is one that I feel like you're going to agree with me, but I know you can add some more nuance to this. The use of Wotan or Wotan.
I mean, just go to Stephen McNallen's YouTube page, right?
Correct. And
Yeah.
traditionally now it is used as an acronym for Will of the Aryan Nation. WOTAN. Wotan. There's apparently this really obscure historical use of it.
Not obscure. It's the reason why they picked it. This is how fucking fascists work, man. Like, they'll take something that is, they're trying to do it with Anglo-Saxon, and there was this like big conversation there, right? But the Wotan thing is taken from Carl Jung's article on Wotan as kind of the soul of the German people, written in 38, I think. If you can imagine like what the political environment
Right.
was at the time of 38 in Germany. But the issue with Wotan, it's at the time that was the academic way of looking at, of spelling the old High German continental heathen view
For
of
Odin.
this particular deity of,
Right.
like, yeah. So Wotan wound up becoming, well, the continental Germanic people, the Aryan image or whatever the fuck of the deity, and that fed pretty well into stuff like metagenetics that McNallen wound up coming up with, pulling out of his ass later on in the 70s. But at the time, that was like the Carl Jung's article was written. That was the academic term for that. Now there's Wodan, Wodan, or Woden, Oden, I believe, and that's another spelling for a similar entity. Maybe it gets into the nuances of like whether or not you're translating from this, that, or the other, right? I even think that Wotan is still used in some academic circles. I may be wrong on that. I'm not sure, but when you see heathen groups using that term, it's become this acronym, Will of the Aryan Nation. It's become the common spelling for the high god that fits in the place of Odin among very overt white supremacist types. And when you see like a heathen group especially saying Wotan, a lot of like heathen groups are aware enough to know that that is not only a dog whistle, but one of the most overt ones. So you can count on those people either being absolute fucking Nazis,
Right.
complete idiots, or both.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. When I, you totally jumped on that rant, and it was 100% spot on. When I say obscure, I mean obscure today. Nobody's calling Odin Wotan except for Nazis. Like, it's just not happening in today's time. If they know that word, it's because they've dug into some really racist shit. Another one that I've got, we've covered Gather the Folk. We've kind of jumped around on my list a little bit. Phrases like follow your ways, drink from your own well, start with your own home, going home, follow your own ancestors, return to your roots. Those are all really extremely dog whistly to racism. It's all about referring back to the pure white people, the Aryan race, the people of Europe only, stuff like that. Those phrases should be avoided at all costs in conversation. And if you see other people using them, call them out on it. One that's kind of obscure, but that I like, someone else brought this up. Using...
Can I talk on the thing you just said?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the draw from your own well thing. Get into that for a second. Is what that is doing is basically promoting cultural protectionism and in division. And cultural protectionism is essentially to say that this culture exists and that we should protect it in its form as much as possible without having any sort of external change to it as much as possible, right? And in some cases, there's when you get into observations of oppression dynamics and stuff, there is reason to have discussions around a cultural protectionism of, certain identities, certain religions, and so on. And this is where the Folkish heathenry alliance to some Native American faiths winds up kind of popping up, right? That Aaliyah Kai jumps into this in her video on folkism, in depth. And the reason why this effort works for Native American faiths, but not for heathenry, is because of the lack of oppression dynamics for in the same sense, right? That you don't have you don't have the same kind of history on heathens that you have with Native Americans. You just don't. It's not the same fucking thing. And on top of that, the heathen religion, as far as its ancient iteration, died. And what we have left now is books. Everything that I know about heathenry, everything Wolf knows about heathenry, everything theodes know about heathenry, can be learned from books as far as its relation to the historical iteration of heathenry. This religion died and is being reconstructed. That is not the case with some of these living faiths with living traditions that exist in other areas of the world that have these oppression dynamics in which cultural protection efforts make sense in order to work against colonialist efforts.
Yeah, they
Heathenry
almost
doesn't
died.
have that effect on it.
Yeah, they almost died, and white people damn near succeeded on many of them. But luckily, because of their protectionism that they've employed for their culture, they were able to survive.
Here's the things that you can say about what happened to heathenry. It was destroyed by Christians in Europe on a gradient from 1000 AD or CE to about 12 to 1400, right? It ends, like, paganism in Europe largely ends with the Northern Crusades. Which, if you guys look into that, that's the efforts by the Teutonic Order of Knights to destroy the pagan kingdom of Lithuania. And there's also the Christianization of Sweden and Norway. The difference between that dynamic and the dynamic that we're dealing with Native American faiths or Indigenous faiths or First Nations faiths, the difference in that dynamic is the Northern Crusades and the Christianization and all of that wiped out that religion. It's gone, right? So you wind up with this reconstruction thing. That gets back to my point about everything can be learned from books. The second point is, as far as oppression dynamics that heathens face in modern society, it has to do with just like the same kind of stuff that pretty much all pagan / non-Christian faiths in America deal with, right? Like it's comparable to the collective experience of minority faiths in America. There's some unique elements about it, but honestly, it's not a heck of a lot more extreme, and in most cases less extreme than the experiences of other minority faiths, for example, Muslims in America, right? So the oppression dynamics that heathens can say that they're under exist, but aren't in a way that is extreme, especially such to the point that there needs to be any conversation about cultural protectionism, because there's nothing there to be all like, we need to be protectionist over this shit. And imagining that there is winds up creating this, like, you wind up having to appeal to shit like race souls, like Stephen McNellen does.
So I'm really glad you brought up Muslims and stuff like that, because another one that I have on my list is the terms desert religion and desert god. Those are huge dog whistles for anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim rhetoric.
Islamophobia.
Yeah, Islamophobia. Thank you.
And
so,
I think
go ahead.
This gets into there's a lot of conversations to be had about like criticizing monotheist religions and how to appropriately go about that. You want to do so in a way that doesn't, like, you can criticize monotheist religions, but you don't want to do so in a way that is like demonizing people, right? Or creating or exacerbating existing hate movements. That's something that you need to be really responsible about when you go through those kind of criticisms and having those discussions, because otherwise you're going to be falling into these categories of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, right?
Yes. I kind of want to circle back a little bit to when you brought up tribalism. I forgot that this was on my list. You're nailing things that are a little bit ahead of my list, but I can't see it. No, you're fine. You're doing great.
We're all interrelated. It's a giant pretzel.
It really is. So to circle back to tribalism, while I 100% agree with you on the theological aspect of tribalism versus folkism versus universalism, tribalism can be a dog whistle in the context of like a political discussion. And as we all know, religion is inherently political. Paganism is inherently political. Pretty much everything we do is political. It's really hard to like not be political.
As soon as you say, man, being pagan in America has some difficulties, doesn't it? Your religion just became political.
100%. And so tribalism is definitely like a pretty big dog whistle in terms of a political discussion, because it's calling out, you know, the people who believe that we might be in terms of like a war or a race war or a political war. These people want to like collect small tribe of people to be able to fight off all of those around them. You get the preppers, you get the doomsday people, you get the overzealous gun collector people, which there's nothing wrong with guns, but I know people who've taken it way too far, and should probably be on a list. So, yeah, that's just, tribalism is definitely one to look out for in those instances. But as Ocean pointed out earlier, when we're talking theologically, it really just does come down to folkism versus not folkism. And I agree with him 100% on that. Two that I'm going to kind of put together here, talking about not necessarily theologically, but refusing to say things like trans rights or that I'm pro LGBTQ plus as an ally. Those are massive dog whistles. I find, and here's something that like should just be the theme. There are things that Nazis, bigots, fascists, white supremacists, folkists, they can't say it. Like, they physically won't allow themselves to say it. And that's, trans rights is definitely one of them. Like, they can't muster the energy within themselves to be able to say it out loud unless, you know, they might believe it a little bit or something. They would rather write 2 paragraphs, and remember I said this in my video, that they would rather write 2 paragraphs instead of say, I agree with Declaration 127, or I agree with Declaration of Deeds, or I agree that racism and bigotry have no place in paganism. Instead of just saying, yes, I agree with this thing, yes, I agree with trans rights, they would rather write a paragraph or a book than say the thing. And they'll tell you, well, I support it, but blah, 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 blah. Well, it's not about this. It's about blah, 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 blah. And I said that in my video. And in my comments section, you guys know how many comments were writing books. And I called them out. I said, you're doing the exact same thing I said you would. I told you you would do it, and you went and did it anyways. You can go look at those comments. They're still there. I didn't delete them. And then another one is that kind of like goes with that, using phrases like our women and our men in terms of, instead of saying like our folk, they'll say our women and our men. Big dog whistle about, non-binary erasure and transphobia and stuff like that. They're really dog whistling to like the nuclear family unit and keeping the LGBT plus out of their group. That's the whole goal there with using those words. Using phrases like Indigenous Europe is a really big one. Which you kind of have to like look out for, and Ocean's kind of made me aware of this as well over the time. People who obsess with pi, Proto-Indo-European, can sometimes be whistling back to something like the Indigenous European values there, thinking that... Say again?
Want me to rant on that one?
Oh, please do.
So Proto-Indo-European, or PI, or there's a number of different iterations of it, but Proto-Indo-European is the most common one. Is there's the what it does accurately when you're looking at history is to say that there's a family of religions that have similar themes to them, that seem to have a lineage of relation between them because there were exchanges of ideas between peoples and migrations over the course of several centuries, even millennia. And that explains, and that we can draw some webs between different iterations of religions across the world to say that, well, okay, there was a migration from here to here, and we see this deity with these attributes show up in both locations, but they have distinctions between each other. So there's an idea passage that happened here. Now, that's reasonable. What's unreasonable and winds up falling into like Nazi category is that it winds up dog whistling for the Nazi legend of the Aryan Übermensch, basically the sort of Superman image that they believed they were like creating within their racial science and shit like that. Quote unquote. It's big fucking air quotes around. But so there is within that you get a couple of problematic concepts that wind up showing up. One of them is that through examining Proto-Indo-European patterns, you can, or pre-Indo-European, Proto-Indo-European, what you wind up seeing is evidence of an original pantheon, right? And I had this thrown at me really early in my polytheist debate days, and somebody said, "You're not worshiping Thor, you're worshiping," they spat it out. I think it was Donar at the time, and I was like, "What?" But this massive relabeling attempt of trying to place all the deities into this category of an original pantheon of archetypes suggests that there was one religion that wound up spreading across the world, and that's bullshit. What happened, likely, is that you had several religions and several peoples all around the world, and you had people spreading. There was as migrations and all this stuff occurred, which we can track, you wound up having idea exchanges that resulted in deities being worshipped from one culture to another and being incorporated into existing pantheons in other places. So there isn't an original pantheon. There is several pantheons that wound up kind of bumping into each other, and over the course of idea mixing, we've wound up with the set of ideas that we've had that we're still studying and picking apart today. And there's been several iterations. Religion changed significantly over geographical and movements across time as well. So you move from your physical geographical location and in your area on the timeline of human existence, you're going to have variations of religion like crazy. So this idea mixing that is normal within humans is wound up kind of creating a number of different religions that have popped up, or iterations of the gods. But this doesn't mean that there was one original idea. It means there were several original ideas that wound up intermixing with one another, and we can kind of see some of those cultural influences when we look pretty close at things. But you have, if you poke around on the internet, you'll see things like, the 10 Proto-Indo-European deities or something like that.
God, fucking choke me now. Jesus Christ.
The sky god, the blacksmith, and it's a massive oversimplification. It winds up ignoring the subtleties of culture, while also identifying like a couple of the similarities that you might see. So it's like, it's frustrating that sometimes stuff like that. It'll have things that you can kind of learn from it, but at the same time, it's written with this slant that is incredibly ahistorical and winds up canceling out what you would otherwise be able to learn from it because of the misinformation that it also contains. It's incredibly frustrating. But anyway, but to get into the racist elements of that, what that does is it attempts to couple the Indo-European pantheon with a white supremacist Aryan narrative that shows that, like, the end result of that, like, twisty road that you get down is that, like, the access to the original religion is through the Aryan race, right? And that's the fucked up kind of observation that this winds up heading down. And if you can see the end of that road, you can try and see whether or not someone's trying to get you to that road. And it's something to keep an eye out for. That is a narrative talking point that won't be stated explicitly, but will be hinted at by people that try and push these narratives of Indo-European deities that you wind up finding coupled with other dog whistles in their content or their rhetoric. That's my rant.
Good rant. Sorry, I got distracted looking up the Asatru Folk Assembly's main page at runestone.org. There's a statement of ethics, I think was the bad one. It was all about promoting, like, the white race and all that kind of stuff. And it was definitely like,
It's their adoption thing.
yeah, the family principle, heathen.
Read it on the...
Yeah, healthy families are the cornerstone of folk assembly, and its strength and prosperity divided from them. Strong, healthy white family relationships. We want our children to grow up to be mothers and fathers, white children of their own. No adoption. We believe that those activities and behaviors supportive of the white family should be encouraged, while those activities and behaviors destructive of the white family are to be discouraged. Literally right there. Statement of ethics, number 4. Ancestry principle. We are a community of united descended from the common ancestry. We value the Union heritage and seek to maintain a vibrant connection with our ancestors. We each should strive to know about our ancestry and commit to that which defines our common folk community. See, it's like, I see so many other people saying similar things like this. Ocean and I actually had a contentious conversation with someone on Twitter the other day, freaking leftist who's been following us for a while, who was parroting similar talking points of the ancestry principle from the AFA. And Ocean kind of went back and forth with that person a little bit before finally I came in and was just like, look, you may not be realizing you're doing this, but I argue with Folkists constantly on these same talking points. So I wish you would stop. And that person got pretty defensive and was like, that's not what I was trying to do. I was like, no, I get that. And I'm not accusing you of being a racist. But I am telling you, you sound exactly like one. And so you need to rethink the way you say things. And that's the problem with dog whistles, is that even if you don't mean to, you end up sounding just like them. And it's really hard. People then get defensive. Why are you calling me a racist? I'm not. I'm letting you know you sound like one. And so you need to stop. And this is why. And then you have to educate. You have to be really patient. Really, really patient. Traditionally, some other phrases are like traditionally minded. When someone bemoans degeneracy or degenerate modernity, calls for return to so-called traditional values. Those are all just 100%, straight up white. It's just straight up white supremacy. There's really no way around it. Faith, folk, family, the AFA motto. It's used as a dog whistle to the social media profiles of folkish groups and individuals, like-minded people. People come in the server here and they use that in their introduction a lot, and it makes my eye twitch so hard. And I know it's probably almost always, at least here, used innocently. But like-minded people, in outside of this space, usually is not a good phrase to use, and I totally wish nobody would ever say it again. But I get it. Like I get the desire to find people who believe like you do. And so that's why I don't call it out here. When people use it in their introduction, they come in, they're new, they just found paganism a month ago, they just found Ocean's channel 2 weeks ago, went through all of his content, went through a few of my videos and went, yeah, these guys are cool. Let me come hang out with them. I want to learn more from them and the community that Wolf has talked about a lot and Ocean has almost never talked about. And so I want to come in and talk and go, hey, I'm here to hang out with like-minded people. Well, racists use that constantly as like, hey, we're like-minded people, right? Like you and me, we think alike, you and me, we're of the same mind. Because they really want to convince you that you're racist too, whether you are or not. They want to push you farther and farther right until you're all the way over there in their corner. And so I understand that people want to find here in our community people that think about the gods because they're new, they're new to paganism and they want to find other people who are also, because likely they're the only people in their entire community IRL that is a pagan. Or at least they think they are because of the broom closet dynamic. Most likely you could throw a rock and hit another pagan and you wouldn't know it because they're not going to admit it and you're not going to admit it, and you both just live next door to each other as pagans for 10 years until one of you accidentally slips up and then you go, you've been a pagan this whole time? Ocean and I both have had that happen to us. There were a couple others. Here's one that Ocean I kind of want you to touch on. It's not heathen directly, but it's in our wheelhouse. A dog whistle for Christian-based white supremacy. I've noticed a lot of heathen-based white supremacy using it as well. Judeo-Christian. That's something that we've dealt with in the server.
Yeah. I guess repeat that specifically again, because I know the idea that you're going for, but like,
so
say that again.
The comment, I didn't write this. The comment that I copied down was, it's a dog whistle for Christian-based white supremacy, but I've noticed a lot of other heathen-based white supremacists using it as well. Judeo-Christian.
Judeo-Christian. There's better people than me to really talk about the issues around that word.
But we can acknowledge that it is definitely a right-wing dog whistle.
There's a number, like Judeo-Christian values is usually
the phrase.
The phrase that people pop up with, and it's a sign of right-leaning kind of white supremacist ideas that there's a number of observations around it, one of which is that there's an exclusion of Islam that is pretty apparent.
Right.
But even like Abrahamic can be like an issue when you
I agree.
Look through like kind of how it's applied and what the intentions are when it's done, when it's not like good faith criticism that winds up falling into something that winds up into these anti-Semitic and Islamophobic categories. But yeah, I look to people that are really good at criticizing like PragerU channels that specialize in those kind of things, to look for more exhaustive and nuanced commentary on that particular element.
Yeah, there's some left-wing YouTubers that you can look at. Yeah, there's some left-wing YouTubers.
Like back in my conservative days, I was a Fox News watcher.
Oh no.
Yeah, right. And that was something that you'd hear on Fox News a lot. Was Judeo-Christian values, Judeo-Christian values. It was something like Bill O'Reilly would say a lot, that kind of shit. Sean Hannity.
Yeah,
Was,
and
it
then
still is, I think.
that fascist fuck, who's
Carlson.
yeah, he's
Carlson wasn't. He wasn't on.
no, the guy now.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, he's said Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
It's a
Says
fairly
it all the time.
yeah,
it's a one that is considered fairly innocuous and like normalized.
yeah.
As a thing, as a standing ground, because it's an appeal to Christians.
Yeah, Bob of the Old Ways says it's code talk for biblical values that excludes actual Jews. It's how Christian fundamentalists try to broaden their appeal.
Right.
That's a good summary.
That's why I'm saying, like, you want to look at people that are more, because they're like more experienced on what the accompanying rhetoric is with that term,
Right.
that makes it a dog whistle. And there's a lot of like really good YouTubers that have actually broken that down and looked at all the pieces of it really well.
Right.
Cyrus has done a number of videos on PragerU and
Yeah.
Judeo-Christian.
Cyrus
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
good source to go to. I was trying to think, like, who could I name without getting myself in hot water? But Cyrus
Cyrus
is
is a
definitely the
really-
best one.
Cyrus goes into it a lot.
So one that I
If you're in this server and also in Cyrus's server, and you want to get some resources from Cyrus, just like ask about this in Cyrus's server, and people will send you links. Cyrus has a ton of videos, and sometimes it can be daunting to kind of like look through them. But
correct.
he's got a number of videos on this kind of stuff, and they can point you to them in his server.
Yeah, just say that Wolf and Ocean said that I'm looking for sources on this subject. Can you please give them to me or point me in the right direction? People will help you. It's a good
Yeah,
community
they'll
over
either
there.
Point you to Cyrus's videos or some other YouTubers.
Absolutely, 100%. So one that I don't have a ton of information on, but is absolutely a problem, especially right now, is that there's a rise in Druid groups using Atlantis to dog whistle a supremacy narrative for their groups.
I have theories on how that could work, but I don't know.
I
need to look into that.
I really want to dig into that a little bit. I feel like I would waste my time because it's so ridiculous. Just that sentence alone, people are going, what? And so that should be enough to dismiss it, but I kind of do want to look into it a little bit just so I'm
Tomb
educated
Raider-
on the subject.
Tomb Raider is saying what my initial reaction to that was.
Yeah, is in Atlantis Creek. Correct.
Right. It's just, what? It's like something that
Yeah.
few like Greek writers like mention offhandedly in some cases. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, but it's yeah, there is a history to Druid groups that has Druidry has a similar modern iteration history that Heathenry does. It just is it's older and took longer. Because Druid organizations popped up in like I want to say either late 1700s or mid 1800s, somewhere in there. It's like you got the orders of Druids and stuff. And this is where we get the image of the white-robed, sickle-carrying Druid.
Yeah.
That it's probably not historical. But a lot of
Don't tell them that.
around this. Say what?
Don't tell them that.
Right. But the like I don't know about the sickle. Like Druids would know more than me about Ailey would probably is probably raging behind her microphone right now. But some of the Druid organizations that popped up in Britain coincided with like this nationalist identity nation state movement that was popping up in Europe at the time. And it got kind of like rolled into that because the part of the process of that was, hey, let's look into our people's national history. And for some people in Britain, that meant going back to the Druids and honoring them in some way. And a lot of these people were like kind of wound up falling into a form of like nationalistic Christo-pagan. So, if you want like history on modern Druidry, that's what you're going to start running into until you get into like into the 20th and 21st century, and then you start getting into Reconstructionist movements. Because before Reconstructionist movements, it was largely that, or some kind of like adjacent historical romanticization. And I don't know enough about it to be like, is this exhaustive and that kind of stuff? Because there could be exceptions that I'm unaware of. This is not something that I've looked into super deeply. I have a general idea of it, but that's like the lineage of ideas that you're going to be looking at is going to contain a lot of this. Until you get into, as somebody's pointing out in chat, Gardnerian Wicca in the 1960s, which was heavily Celtic inspired.
Big agree. So another one that I wanted to bring up was never kneeling. This isn't necessarily like a massive one when it comes to like fascist dog whistles or racist dog whistles, but it is definitely something you kind of want to squint at just a little bit, because one, it's not historical whatsoever. Our ancestors 100% kneeled. The ancient pagans absolutely kneeled, and in several stories laid all the way flat on the ground and prostrated themselves so that they were all the way flat before the gods. It is definitely an eyebrow raiser, I agree, Agnar. It's this weird, and I can understand a little bit the sentiment.
You're talking about don't pray to the gods.
Huh?
Are you talking about don't pray or don't kneel or something?
Yeah,
like that?
don't kneel to pray. You just don't kneel before the gods and stuff like that. It can be a little bit of a dog whistle. The big thing is
ahistorical.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's 100% ahistorical. We've got several sources that show otherwise. I was gonna say though, like just anecdotally, I can kind of understand why they get in that mindset to begin with when trying to run away from Christianity, whereas Christianity is all about being subservient, being less than, being dirt before the Christian God. There's a lot of self-flagellation in Christianity. And so I would never kneel before Odin. That's kind of eyebrow raisy just a little bit, because it ends up pushing this supremacy narrative of yourself above the gods or equal with the gods, which is just not true at all. Not possible in the least. And to kind of lead into that a little bit is anybody who claims that they are descended from the gods or have blood of the gods. And I've seen people do that, and there's a big movement that does that. That's just a neo-Nazi thing. It's 100% fascist. It's just a giant trope within Nazism to say that you've got blood of the gods running through your veins. People who claim any kind of blood ties to the gods honestly aren't worth the time of day. Like, you don't even argue with them. Just block immediately, report if you can, and move on, because it's not worth it. It's just gonna waste your time. We already went over 9 noble virtues. We already went over white genocide. We already went over phrase Indigenous European, our women, our men. Let's see. We already went over tribalism. Anybody who tries to go into phrases like beyond left or right politics or refusal to talk politics, Ocean, you can kind of speak to this a little bit, because you used to kind of hold this view there for a little while. We actually had a rule in the server, I think it was the old server, like years ago.
You mean back in the days when I was like...
It was before YouTube.
Yeah. There was a point I learned from another guy.
Yeah, he had
like-
convinced you.
Yeah, he convinced me of this, but I had also observed it that as soon as you insert, or as soon as you like allow discussion of politics within pagan groups, it spells the beginning of the end for that pagan group.
Right.
And that because people wind up tearing each other apart, the division winds up being created because people hold to like an orthodoxy around their view on a particular deity, this, that, or the other, right? Or and politicize these kind of things. What I wound up finding out later on through experience is that a lot of like the actual dividing issue that makes people, it winds up causing this kind of shit, are trans issues. And it's people that are not willing to recognize trans identities of various types. That's what the that's what the divisions wind up being over.
Yeah.
And it's wild that this is kind of what convinced me that this is a dumb fucking take, is that it wound up being like, okay, either you shut down these conversations and don't have them, and you wind up not learning from each other, or you allow them and we try and like suss it out and figure it out, right? And I think that, you know, the particular person in question, the issues that wound up dividing myself and him later on were like about NB identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And it was wild to me that it was like, oh wait, this is why we quash discussions of politics. It's because we don't want to suss these things out. In order to wind up like coming together and having spiritual time, we wind up avoiding discussions of things that are incredibly important to us, even spiritually. Wait, that's stupid. Why are we doing that?
It was super weird too, because he was gay.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't want to get into like more particulars on that, but yeah, he like, yeah. And
like he should have known better is really my
Yeah,
point.
he should have known better.
Like
But-
the oppression dynamics were there, and he
Right.
was still using his privilege to oppress
Correct.
this other identity.
One thing that wound up convincing me, and I'm sure that Kimura doesn't mind me saying their name in this, I often references Kimura's argument that when we had the no politics rule in either here or previous server, I can't remember which. I think it was here actually.
It was here for like a few months.
Right. But Kimura was like, wait a minute. What is the line on what is politics and what is not politics? Like, show it to me, because I'm having, because as soon as something affects your life in any meaningful way, it's political. And that's the reason why I said earlier, like, okay, so if as soon as you say being a pagan in America is somewhat difficult, political. So you can't say that now in a no politics server. And it winds up becoming, well, it's fine to talk about politics as long as it's relevant to the spirituality. Now, that's when the transgender discussion winds up complicating that, because a lot of people view LGBTQ issues as political in a way that shouldn't be discussed within spirituality groups, which is weird.
Correct.
So then you start bringing up, well, okay, is Loki gender fluid? Is Odin gender fluid? Is Northor transmasculine? Is Skathi transfeminine? Oh shit, now we have to discuss these things, and they're entirely relevant.
Part of spirituality.
Right. So,
Especially when people's
wait, but politics are
identities.
banned. We can't talk about these
Yeah.
things.
Especially when people's gender identities are wrapped up in the veneration of the gods that they are close to.
Right. And in the case of Northor and Skathi, are they like considered the most likely things scholastically? No, but they are in the scholastic discussion, and they should be discussed, because there are questions there that are worth exploring honestly And if you have a community that is like, no politics can be discussed, and that's what they mean is don't discuss gender and sexuality, then just because it's a hot button issue and we don't want people fighting, it's like, oh, okay, well, we can't honestly investigate our religion anymore, which is stupid.
I agree. Okay, he muted. I was going to let him finish his rant.
Yeah.
I had a note here wrote down that I forgot earlier. The very Indo-European phrase is dog whistled by Survive the Jive pretty often. Thomas Roswell. Rousel. Dox that motherfucker. Piece of shit. There was another one up here that I wanted to touch before I moved on to my last point. Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick on the politics thing. Since we've allowed discussion of politics, like no one's been banned over fiscal policy. Right? Like this isn't something that you know, you wind up going, it winds up being, oh, you're a fucking bigot. Like that because someone says something that is, it falls into like this wild category, right? And it's not when you allow for discussion of politics, the things that you find get discussed in a pagan server that are political related have to do with these things that we just talked about a second ago. It's not like, you know, war policy or numerous other things that wind up popping up when you're in like a political discord or something like that.
Right.
That doesn't become like the focus. And you know, and we haven't wound up with giant political debates in here, even though discussing politics is fine. Like occasionally there's a scuffle here and there, right? But it's not, generally isn't a huge issue.
Nope. Yeah, the no politics is there to just shield bigots every time, and
that's what it winds up being.
Yeah, a lot of other people saying I join. Go ahead.
When we talk about this is what was explained to me with the no politics rule. The idea was, it was like, you know, if somebody's a fucking Nazi or whatever the fuck and they join, the understanding was, it's like, it's fine to let them join, just tell them to change their profile picture from the dog whistly thing or whatever, and let them engage, but so that they can like learn information and that kind of stuff, and maybe they'll naturally evolve into a better position. And that is such a naive fucking view on how that works. Because that's not how that works.
Nope.
That creates an environment in which those people can take advantage of. Because that's the nature of dog whistles, the nature of Nazi dog whistles and that kind of shit, of fascistic rhetoric, is to be able to benefit from these kind of environments that don't allow direct discussion about the issue.
100%. Another one that ends up a lot in heathenry is the use of wolves of Odin, or I'm a wolf of Odin, or I'm a werewolf for Odin. Dog whistling to Operation Werewolf, which was an actual Nazi movement that is still active today. There's the wolves of Vinland. All of those are just massive, literal Nazi dog whistles. I can understand being interested in wolves. I can understand being interested in the wolves of Odin. Gary and Freki. I am getting tattoos of Gary and Freki on my body like 2 months from now. I in my early days, before I wised up a little bit, I bought a shirt that said, why be I want to say it was, why be a lamb of God when you can be a wolf, wolf of Odin. I bought that shirt and then immediately regretted it. Because like I bought it and it came in and I opened it and I looked at it and I went, you know, this is kind of fucking stupid. Why did I buy this? I never wore it. I literally threw it in the back of my closet and I was like, nah, I'll where would I wear this? It would just be antagonistic as fuck, which was probably the reason I bought it to begin with. It was so long ago, I barely remember. But yeah, it's those kind. Yeah, it's like one of those gamer T-shirts for sure. It's got the same vibe. It's very edgy, but the wolves of Odin can definitely be a big dog whistle. So it's just one to look out for when you have people come in and bang on their chest, and try to go, I'm a wolf of Odin. Yeah, I'm tough and big and bad. It's just the meathead Nazi in them trying to come out. There was, I think that was most of my list. Oh, no. Here's one. Use of terms and concepts taken from heathenry overlaps with esoteric Hitlerism, such as Thulian, Hyperborean, Sedian, Avatar, Vril, Pledian, and stuff to do with Atlantis, Hollow
I
Earth.
learned about Vril a while ago. Can I tell you the story on
Yeah.
that? Somebody, we were in a voice chat like late at night at one point. Some of y'all might have been here for it. I'm not sure who was. But somebody was like, hey, so is this thing white supremacist? And I was like, I don't know, but let's find out. And I was just like, I'm just going to show y'all how I figure this out, right? And it was an author that somebody gave me the name of. It's like, hey, is this person good? And I was like, I have no fucking clue. It's like they wrote about Vril. Okay, I don't know what that is, but let's find out. Let's learn. And I just did a quick Google, and I was like, let's look at how this person describes their own work. And you can usually just find it pretty easily that way. What do they put on the back of their own texts? And what I found was, holy shit, the dog whistles. It was like finding the Aryan energy and it's just like, oh dear God. Okay, here we are. Yeah, I'd say this is some supremacist shit. Something that and it was so overt when just looking at how they describe their own work. And a lot of times when you get into like authors, especially authors that were published, before like 5 years ago, right? Like what happens is these people get better at hiding their language because their language changes. So when you're looking at a book that is like 5+ years old and looking at what's on the text on the back, they're using older dog whistles that people are now more aware of, and they're more apparent. So you can be like, look, there it is. And sometimes they don't even use dog whistles on the just because you don't find any dog whistles and things like this doesn't mean that it's not going to be racist. It just means that it might be just hidden in the book. But in this particular case, we wound up finding like a bunch of things because looked at multiple books, right? Was finding this kind of shit as a trend throughout this guy's books. And if I remembered his name, I'd say it because I'm not changing the names to protect the innocent or anything like that. But in this particular case, this was a very bad situation. And yeah, like that's especially if you look at older books of an author, you can figure out whether if those dog whistles are there because you can recognize them. But sometimes they're better at hiding than that. But that's like an easy way of just like checking real quick. So just look for the obvious. And if the obvious is there, then you know.
Yeah. The other big one was Hyperborean. And
I've seen a number of books published recently.
Yeah, and our good buddy WoO here pushed that concept really fucking hard earlier in the year. Yeah, Fortress of Lu pushes it really fucking hard too. But back in
Oh, this is a great time for me to post those screenshots, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Hold on a second, guys. We're about to get spicy. Chat, do we want to get spicy?
Let's see if I can find it here. It was the North American
Bring the spice.
paganism.
Okay. I want to be clear. Let's just pull on an example. Lug So he doesn't like white supremacy in here. He says the global-minded elite contrived the form of the empire. About which cultures sounds more like pan-European white nationalist trash, as opposed to ethnic nationalism like me. Now, when we were talking about earlier, in Wolf's presentation, right, there was that discussion of denial, and then using softer language, and sometimes you get like these people will do this kind of thing, which is to call out people that are on their own side, and then advance a position like ethnic nationalism as more reasonable, right? Like, and here he is doing it again. At whatever conversation this is in, somebody deleted the middle tweet. Fortress of Lug is a Celtic polytheist YouTuber. It is tiresome being assailed by pagans when you know the real reason they are nitpicking everything that you have ever said is entirely motivated by their politics, specifically their hatred of mine. Firstly, I don't hate other races. Secondly, I've never argued for culturally or racially exclusive paganism. I'm a universalist and a traditionalist, as truth is universal, right? We're providing an argument here. Yet another straw man based on my ethnic nationalist position. He's saying that he's an ethnic nationalist. 2 posts saying that he is one. But he's trying to distinguish himself and say, no, I'm more nuanced. I'm the more brainy one, right? I don't hold the white nationalism. I don't hold the racial superiority. I hold the cultural protectionism and saying that we should just have a homeland kind of shit. It's not substantively different. It's the same fucking thing. It's advancing stuff that's on the same side. See what else I can find. Oh, and here he is. Yeah. So then you wind up, what are the dog whistles? Are there dog whistles he's using? There's Hyperborea. Here he is decrying experts in the field. You get into positions in which he says that talks about observations on the race war. There's kinds of things like this that get very specific and interesting, right? And then you get little dog whistles like this. Want to know what's radicalizing young men, an insane anti-white agenda that is destroying our culture. See, like now that you know these things, if you listen to Wolf's earlier thing, take those observations that Wolf gave and just like look at this post. They're trying to be subtle as fuck. But look, he's replying to Project Lincoln.
Yeah, right.
But you can see like he's like putting out a missive to people that he's wanting to attract. And you once you know what you're looking for, sometimes they're pretty obvious after a while because you know what you're looking at now.
So I went to the Wisdom of Odin video, Norse paganism filling in the blanks. He posted it on January 25th and only got 6,600 views, which most of his videos don't get very many views these days. But he pushes forward this book, North American Paganism, I believe, is the title of that book.
Yeah, that's the one that has like some...
It's full of white supremacist dog whistles. Like the book is just full of it, and it pushes forward the idea of Hyperborea. And that's where I first learned about it, was like, wait, what's Hyperborea? And I dug into it, and I was like, oh, it's really fucking bad. Like, really fucking bad. And it's all just like white race, Aryan purity bullshit. That's all it is. And he was pushing, WoO was recommending, saying this book is great, which I find telling. The last bit of that earlier was alien origins of humans, which this dumb fuck also believes that humans came from Mars, which is just the weirdest thing ever. there was another. The last one I kind of want to touch on, and Ocean and I had a conversation about this the other day. I guess it was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday, the conversation you and I had, Ocean. Others that are... No, I'm sorry. Statements like sharing real expertise free of both ivory tower elitism and the agendas of self-appointed gurus. It's a dog whistle referencing like cultural elites, aka educated liberal scholars. You get centrist types trying to avoid politics in their education. And in heathenry, I think it's 100% unavoidable to try to elevate yourself above the political discourse of religion. And it's like it's no different than having a no politics rule in your server. Having a no politics rule for your content is it's they've got something to hide. And that's usually what that means. It's just like how the no politics rule only shields the racists. It's like, why?
It puts you in a side in which, okay, well, you're not fighting against this, therefore.
Right. Like, why wouldn't you do it? It's the same thing. It's like, why won't you just say it? Why won't you just say it? Like, what do you have to lose except probably some moral that you hold that you don't want to give up? But also you know that you'll probably get in some trouble if you say what you really think then. Like, there's really, like, no way around that. So, you know, that's just kind of like where you're at with that.
Nazis as an academic. Like, I think that, you know, for example, right? But, you know, there's some cases where it's like, okay, if you don't want to step into the fray, I get that. If you don't feel like you have the expertise.
What if you wanted to step into the fray?
What?
What if you wanted to step into the fray?
Oh, just... you derailed my thought train for that.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, if you feel like you don't have the expertise, if you feel like there's certain ways where I'm like, okay, I see why maybe you don't want to jump in. But oftentimes it's like once you're settled into like a leadership position within a religion, especially in a religious context, especially in a teaching spirituality context or something along those lines, right? If you're an educator on spirituality, then I think it becomes incumbent upon you to discuss certain things that are affecting that community that you're leading, either, you know, purposefully or accidentally, right? Like if you fell into that position or you didn't, you need to discuss some of these things, otherwise you're becoming part of the problem.
Check the chat. I'm not going to say it out loud for the recording, but check the chat.
What the fuck?
So, Ocean sent me a link, and it's a resource for the server. And I'm going to post the link in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Fuck it, we can discuss Crawford.
Okay.
I don't give a shit.
I didn't know if you wanted to avoid it or not.
Yeah, I don't, yeah. You know, because we had a discussion on this privately where it's like, okay, I don't mind what he said as much, you know, because he's not positioning himself as a pastor or anything like that. He's not a gothy. He's not
right.
Like
he's also not trying to build any kind of community. He wants to avoid community. If he could never meet a single person who watches his content, he would die happy.
Yeah. And like that from that perspective, it's like, okay, well, he gets a few points, right? Like
I agree.
There's some excuses I can see because it's like he doesn't want to jump into the fray. He's not prepared for it. He doesn't want to. He's been pretty clear about that. He's like, I'm not a practitioner. I'm just.
Yeah, he doesn't hide it.
I'm just sharing information.
Yeah, he's
would
not.
It be helpful
posturing.
if he would say something? Yeah. But I kind of get why he doesn't want to. At the same time.
Ocean and I had a really good conversation about it. I'm really. I'm very unforgiving when it comes to this kind of thing, and I know Ocean is as well. I'm not saying Ocean's not. Do you mind if I quote the thing that I said, Ocean?
What? Not knowing at all. What you mean.
Yeah, I know that makes you sweat.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, what are you fucking talking about?
You said, I don't think anyone could effectively pressure Crawford into saying anything political. He'd probably just walk away before saying anything.
Right.
And I said, and that's a red flag to me, personally. Like, anybody who refuses to say the thing.
There's sometimes, and I can just talk about this, like, from a creator standpoint, right?
Right.
There's times where it's like, this is not my area of expertise.
Right.
So I don't need to be commenting on it.
Right.
Right. Like, that's something that is a concern that pops in my head when I'm looking at certain topics within Heathenry to cover. It's like, that I don't know enough about this element that becomes necessary to discuss when covering this specific area. I don't know enough about that, so I'm uncomfortable talking about it right now. So I'm going to wait till I educate myself.
Correct.
Or I'm just not going to be able to cover it.
Correct.
Right? And there's some subject matters that I feel that way on within Heathenry. It's like, okay, well, the best thing to do is not make an ignorant video on the thing, whatever it is. And if I could see Crawford looking at political discourse in that way, where it's like, this is not his circus. He doesn't know the landscape on that front very well.
Right.
And therefore doesn't want to play.
Yeah. He actually doesn't understand the religion at all, which is
I don't
one
know
of
this about him.
I do.
Okay.
He gets stuff.
He has made a video where he's like, the religion, the people that follow this religion confuse me, actually. Right?
Yes.
He said that?
Yeah, he has. Yeah, he's said that. And people who know him have said, like, no, he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the religious nuance, which is one of the big criticisms that people levy at him quite often, is that he just doesn't get it. Like, he'll translate things exactly, but skip over a bunch of nuance that may help provide context to the translation, and that can sometimes muddy the waters just a little bit.
If you're looking at the sagas and language and stuff as like just a linguist, you're just looking at the language and what things mean, and you're not familiar with the history of the people surrounding that, like, in a way that is, I'm sure that he has a general understanding of Scandinavian history and especially of Iceland, right? But like, there's some times where it's diving into it a little bit further can give you nuances in order to make your translation better. That maybe he had, like, that Ryan, for example, one of his criticisms of Crawford is that he doesn't seem to have done that enough to satisfy him, for example. So, like, that can come up in your translation. I don't know enough about the subject in order to make those criticisms in a way that is like as surgical as, say, Ryan could, right?
Right.
But but like, that will affect your work that you're doing. And if you're confused about like what even the religion, as far as it's modernly practiced, even really is, or understanding why people are even drawn to it in the first place,
right,
you probably shouldn't be the guy commenting on the politics there.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think what you and I ultimately
say something like "fuck Nazis," but
I think you and I ultimately agreed on it is that he's the one person who gets this very slim pass because of the position that he's in. And literally
the same thing from Aerith Harger, for example.
Literally nobody else gets this pass. Yeah.
Like, Aerith Harger has been like
vocal.
Right, very.
Several videos, and recently several videos, saying fuck Nazis, fuck the alt-right, fuck white supremacists, it's not historical, there were gay Vikings. Like, he's just like knocking it out of the park, saying the right things. And I know that there's this weird Reddit movement against him. It's pretty bullshit, and I'll just go on the record saying that. For so many reasons. So Ocean, to get all the way back around, I posted this in the wrong channel. I posted this on Hadrian's Wall. I'm sorry.
Good job.
Let me post it in the VC, actually. Here's the link so you guys can follow along, and I will click on it.
I love this link.
This is a fantastic source. I want you all to save it. I want you to bookmark it. I want you to put it on your home screen.
If you forget, it is in the description of my video about WoO.
Yes. So
Like this is like a big point, and if people wanted to dig further into it and recognize like why I was going after WoO specifically, if you click this link and you start going through some of the terms and little things that are discussed in there, they're all really fucking important.
yeah.
And it kind of gives you a sense of like why I even made that video in the first place.
So I made my list and I sent it to Ocean, and Ocean was like, "Hey, don't forget about this." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I did forget about this." And so some of this stuff is doubled over, and we're about 2 hours in, so we can fire through this pretty quickly.
Think we need to go through
I
this
don't
list.
I don't think we really do either. I just want you guys to like be super aware of it and have it because it's pretty comprehensive. It gives the term or phrase, and then it gives a good example of why bad. So you definitely want to, and see, like, even like Code for Nazi, America First, Eurofolk, Eurocentric, Volkish, Nativist, Race Realist, stuff like that. So it's definitely good to be aware of these things and understand that the stuff that we've gone over is just a percentage of what exists out there. This isn't a 100% full comprehensive list. It is meant to help give you guys tools to understand what could be and what is out there and what has been out there. But even as we're talking, they're working really hard to obscure and cover it up, to try to make it harder to see them so that they can infiltrate, get in your spaces, and try to convert and convince. It's their whole point. Ocean's posting some Twitter threads that's got some interesting stuff on WoO. You guys should definitely bookmark for later. But yeah, I kind of want to, I guess, open up the floor a little bit for some Q&A. Ocean, I know you said that you didn't have a ton of time for that, but if you want to stick around for a minute or two, if you guys have a question.
I'm gonna stick around for a second.
Yeah.
I am going to post an at everyone in the Patreon area because the new video is uploaded and finished.
Yep.
So I can do that now. But so that's a thing. I'm going to go ahead and post that there, and I'm going to start writing the Patreon release for it for everybody as well.
Yep.
So I'll be doing that kind of like while we're doing the Q&A.
Cool. So let's see. Which, you had your hand up first. You can unmute yourself because you're a mod.
Am I muted?
Everybody was muted.
Am I still muted though?
No, you're good now.
Okay, yay. Did we mention why we kind of side-eye genealogy discussion when it pops up in the server? And like why?
I don't think I addressed that specifically. If you want to bring that up, yeah, let's do it.
I can talk about it briefly too, and then Witch, if you want to jump on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
First thing I want to say is like genealogy's good. That like my mom got into genealogy and found a bunch of stuff about our family history, and it's all cool as shit, right? So like that's the pursuit of genealogy is awesome, and it can also, in the religion that's associated with ancestor veneration, it's totally cool and good to jump into. It just also winds up being a dog whistle for like some weird, this is where I want Witch to jump in, just because I wanted to make the clarifier that like, yeah, it's genealogy is not bad inherently. You know, it's cool. But yeah, go ahead, Witch.
Oh yeah, like it's a hobby I've been doing since I was a teenager. Like it just it gets a side eye because it can be used as a segue into hereditary discussion and I'm this tradition because of my bloodline, or I have a ancestry connection to this place on the globe, so therefore that is now my culture. And it's like, see about that. No. Like it's I'm not wording very well. Um, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Because I'm like, I just was wondering if we had.
Yeah, I think it's
About,
good
like,
to kind of
what we
like
said,
reiterate. Yeah, to kind of reiterate what you said. I think it's good to be interested in like your past. Like, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm interested in checking out some of my history as well. I know a pretty good bit just from stories, but I'd like to just see where that tree leads, you know? But it doesn't have anything to do with our spirituality. Like, our spirituality isn't defined by our genes or our DNA, our blood. None of that has anything to do with the connection we have to the land whites, our ancestors, the gods, because even ancestors in history, like, we have historical attestation of this, that adoption is 100% valid in ancestor veneration. So
right.
blood has nothing to do with ancestor veneration. It's just like the thing you can usually like trace a little bit easier. But you can adopt people from outside your family. You can adopt historical figures into your family veneration, your ancestor veneration.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at historical figures that you look up to, or, you know, give you a sense of pride or whatever, and you can bring them into your ancestor veneration praxis. So, yeah, all of that
And
is valid.
one other thing before I forget it, like for the fifth time tonight, there's a lot of discourse that's happening right now in like the BIPOC spaces and allies and accomplice spaces about looking into your ancestry, finding out where you come from, find out where the disconnect happened, find out, what culture was taken away from you too. And that's valid. But if it's a living culture, there's a respectful way to go about it. There is a respectful way to contact people living in that culture and ask if you can learn about it and explain to them why you're doing that and why you're wanting to learn about it. Like, don't just go bulldozing in and I've got blood, I'm connected here, this is mine now. Like, that's no. Don't be respectful if you're going to go that route.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Witch. Does anybody else have a question? You can hand raise and I'll unmute you. All right, Valley. Let's see. Where are you on the list? At the end. V. Oh, no, you're at the top because of the exclamation mark. Ah, you tricked me. All right. What's up, Valley? You should be able to unmute yourself now. There you go. Man, push to talk. Yes, the golden one is a fascist.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't realize there was a question on that.
Someone mentioned golden
I
one.
put a description out about like the Nazis and like hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, and someone said the golden one question
Yeah.
mark, and I said,
Yeah.
the golden one is a fascist. Which sucks because they've got 1 million subs. Valley, you good? You're struggling over there.
He doesn't have 1 million subs. He has
I thought he did.
no, Jesus Christ, no.
Who am I thinking of?
Golden one has 100. He's smaller than what's his face?
Ha 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 ha.
He's smaller than Survive the Jive.
Hello?
Hey, Valley.
I hear you.
Okay.
Throw
I'm
that
here.
question at
Hello.
us.
Okay. It actually wasn't my question. Tomb Writer had a question, but they said they didn't have a voice. And it was, I'm having a slight issue with one of the talking points in here, and then they quoted hand-to-hand combat as a part of a religious identity. And they said, I was wanting to get into HEMA and dedicate that time and energy to my gods because that was a part of their domains. 2 of them of gods of death who take their dead from battlefields. Like, that's a normal connection for me to make. But, like, Nazi shit? How? I get making a small army is a bad thing, but I don't think that's automatically a Nazi thing. And I don't think I was here for the whole hand-to-hand combat part, but from what I could suss out just out of my brain, I think a lot of...
We actually didn't address it.
Oh, you didn't address it?
Mm-mm.
I think... Okay.
No, let me go back
think
up to the question. Read it.
As it would be addressed, I would assume that it is like all about the hyper-masculine ideal of being a fighter and like being super close to Odin and being close to Tyr or Thor because you're strong and you do MMA or some bullshit like that, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So like I just wanted to address Tomb Raider's concerns on that. Like, I think devotion to your gods via physical activity or any activity really is super valid and totally awesome. And I don't think that like I think just like with any kind of activity, you have to be conscious and aware when you go into that of the connotations surrounding it. And you don't have to justify yourself to anyone, but know why some people might be like, why is that? What's going on there? Is this is dog whistly kind of? Can you explain to me? That kind of bullshit, you know?
Agreed.
I want to jump into this a little
Yeah,
bit.
do it.
So the looking at the question, I wanted to get in. I'm just going to reread it. I wanted to get into HEMA and dedicate time and energy to the gods because it's part of domains. 2 of them gods of death, battlefields, right? And the observation that's made in the article is hand-to-hand combat as part of religious identity. So just to be clear, I'm looking at getting to HEMA too. Like I don't see an issue with that, and I don't see any problem with doing it as a religious activity. I also don't even see a problem with it as a as part of your religion or whatever the fuck. Like it's clear that in history that was a thing, right? So what it winds up being though is it's the reason why it's a dog whistle is that you get a lot of these people that build these hyper masculine images of the religion, and a lot of that gets centered around combat, and that is where the dog whistle is, right? Is being like, this is the religion, that if you're not doing this, then you're not part of the religion, right? And that's what they mean as part of a religious identity, that it is essential to being heathen to take part in a combat training of some sort, because otherwise you're not heathen. Now that's bullshit. If you look at the history of heathenry, a lot of the people that were practicing this religion were farmers that didn't know shit about fighting for the most part, at least not as much as professional soldiers or professional, like when you got into the Viking part of the culture, right? The people that went raiding knew more about fighting than the farmers. And maybe the farmers could handle themselves in a group against raiders or something like that, but it wasn't like a part of their religious identity. They were doing reciprocity. Heathenry, when you get right into it, it is mostly an agricultural religion, and then there's a lot of elements of war around it, but it is highly stressed on the agricultural part. A lot of it's about planting shit and getting harvest. So, you know, that if you're going to try and say, if somebody's going to try and say that fighting or that combat is like an essential part of the religious identity, there is greater justification to say you're not part of a heathenry unless you're a farmer, right? So, and if you disagree with that, which I think a lot of these people do, then the whole like you need to be a fighter in order to be part of this religion is stupider than that, right? But anyway, and that's why you get into the dog whistle part, is because there is like an image among fascistic people that you build like this hyper masculine image of yourself as like a fighter and a soldier and all this other shit, and it's part of the war rhetoric that's in the culture. So that's why that's there, and that's why it's considered a dog whistle.
That makes sense, and I appreciate the clarification for both myself and Tomb Raider.
I hope Tomb Raider's here.
Y'all check out my
Oh, they are.
yeah, y'all check out my stream real quick. I know there's 36 of you. The other 15 hop in. This is Forrest Munden. He's actually lost his Instagram several times.
Like the living embodiment of this shit.
Yeah, and this is like peak. And so this is a guy that Wisdom of Odin is super buddy-buddy with. I don't know if they still hang out, but Wisdom of Odin... Yeah, Wisdom of Odin knew... I think so. I think they did some more podcast stuff together recently. But Wisdom of Odin knew as of December that Forrest was a Nazi and was part of the AFA. Forrest actually left the AFA because they weren't white supremacist enough. I don't fully understand that, but that was the reason he left the AFA, because they weren't being hard enough and they were being too soft on pushing white supremacy. And so this is Forrest's Instagram.
He's got damn Instagram numbers though.
It's got 4,000 followers.
No, there's a, what is it, the like Child of Soul or whatever the fuck.
I believe he lost that account.
Yeah, but that was a big account.
Yeah, it was. But he this is his third or fourth account this year. It keeps being deleted because he'll just, like you said, he thinks that it doesn't go enough, and so he will make it go. But he posts these one picture. You know, the pictures are innocuous usually, but then driven genetic code. You are not abnormal. There's nothing wrong with you. Just a whole bunch of dog whistles. And then, of course, you get us warriors aren't alone. Our time is coming. God, fucking pop-ups. The world is as it is today, may not need people like us, but the world that is coming into being will need us. Need to be strong. And so this is their spirituality, is being fascist and working out constantly. Here's one. Todd is a typical American man. Proportions are based on CDC anthropometric data. U.S. male, age 30 to 39, just shy of a medical definition of obese. This is the average male, and you know, big shaming on that, right? A man can have the most attractive face and great personality, but with this body. And so you get these awful fucking comments, and this is the kind of audience that comes along with people like this, in which, you know, Forrest has some love handles there. I'm not sure what thinks he's hiding. Yeah, so this is the kind of person that this is addressing. Not necessarily people who want to dedicate hard work and time to the gods. Just wanted to make sure that was super clear. There were hands up. We Christo Pagan. Let me unmute you first. Okay, now you can manually unmute yourself and you can say what you want to say.
New video on Patreon, by the way.
Hey, say it again.
Talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, I said my new video has just been posted on Patreon.
We Christo Pagan's not saying anything. So I'm going to move on to the next person. Reality Helix.
If you were just having trouble speaking, we Christo Pagan, just go ahead and type.
Yeah,
in
type it
chat,
type it out.
and I'll read the question out loud for you.
Yep. Reality Helix, let me find you and unmute you. Go ahead, Reality, you can unmute yourself. I'm actually going to change the perms of the channel. People should be able to unmute themselves, but please don't unless I call on you.
Just change the permission. All right, everybody talk at once.
Oh my god.
I'm just kidding,
Don't do that. Reality Helix, you can unmute yourself now and say what you need to say. Yeah, that's true.
Oh, the server mute check mark is still on, everybody.
Oh, that sucks. Oh,
Yeah.
because they joined.
They
That's
joined
sad.
on- Yep.
Well, the
So
two
we
people
can
I've
just-
told
we can
to
just turn that off, right? So,
they would have to leave and come back.
right. I'm just gonna start manually taking it off of people,
That's fine.
just randomly.
Well, the two people that I told to talk had it turned off of them. So, next up would be Nate. And I unmuted you, Nate, so you can unmute yourself.
I heard noises.
That was Sean the Gaul. Sean, please mute yourself. You have to mute yourself if you're not called on to talk.
So is this working or?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
You sound great.
Fantastic. Okay, this was kind of just a question I had for you guys. Me and Ocean talked about it a little bit a few days ago, but when it comes to political stuff, I'm not anywhere near the smartest person in the world. And I usually just tend to describe myself as a centralist. Like I try to look at each problem, from both sides.
Right.
But as was pointed out to me, that causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, I want to say you and I had this conversation as well, like a month or so ago.
Yeah, something along that lines. Yeah, and so I'm like, so my question is, what would I call myself if I was an honest to God centralist? Like, with the exception of human rights, those aren't on the table. But like, I'll talk to a Republican and a liberal over tax law.
I don't see a problem. Some people see a problem with like being in the center, and I don't see a problem with necessarily being in the center
I don't either.
or being somebody that's exploring and all that kind of crap. What winds up being what you need to do as somebody that's responsible and a centrist is to look into some of the bullshit that people are trying to pull on you because you're a target. Politicians, fascists, everybody with a political aim really wants to convince the people in the center. And so you've got, as a centrist, everybody really wants to change your position into one of the other things. So you want to look into like, what are these strategies? What are the dog whistles and bullshit, and get involved in start looking into the philosophy of things that are like trying to get you. Because the mainstream political discussion isn't very nuanced or informed. It's just not. So, but it's made to appeal to centrists. And, it's just like, there's an extra level of digging that you'll need to do in order to really examine like how policy affects things.
Right.
A lot of times centrist positions that are considered centrist or compromises and all that kind of stuff fucking hurt people. And that's just the reality of it, and it sucks.
Yeah.
But the compromises wind up needing to be made in order for there to be any action to be done. Otherwise, no action is done, and then people get hurt worse than if some incremental change is made. And this is where you get into a big philosophical disagreement between people that are political incrementalists and political accelerationists. This is something that if you're in the center, you need to know about, because these are also two different ideas that are trying to convince you of broad stroke changes or incremental changes. And like the difference on the right and between the right and the left is that the left seems to be split between incrementalists and accelerationists, whereas the right, even though there's a division between incrementalists and accelerationists, they tend to work together. And whereas on the left, they tend to fight each other, right? But as far as like what you would term yourself, if you're a centrist, you're a centrist. And it's fine to be honest with yourself about that. But it also, I think that if you're going to be somebody who's in the center, it's incumbent on you to do more reading and understand more about your own positions and why you hold the positions that you do. But Wolf, what did you want to close out with anything before we just kind of like
I just kind of want to like remind everybody that this is definitely going to be an always evolving thing. I kind of said this earlier, but I just really want to reiterate and drive this home. This isn't the end all be all list. The things that I've covered and the things that Ocean have covered, and even what we're going to be covering moving forward this conversation, because I feel like we're just getting started with conversation 2.0 here.
It's going to be an evolving thing over the course of the server's life. It has been. This is just one stage of it.
And who knows, 6 months from now, we may want to revisit this and do this again. 3 months from now, we may need to like address this new thing. We never know, because fascists are creative and they kind of have to be to survive, because if they don't, we suss them out and we get them out of our communities and our spaces, and then they suffocate. They need spaces to feed off of. And if I used to hold this really stupid view that I coughed, that if you push someone out of your community, and people now throw this criticism at me, but if you push people out of your community, it's just going to radicalize them. All they're going to have is each other, and it'll just be an echo chamber. It is proven that works. I used to think otherwise when I was young and dumb, but it's proven that works. Don't let them fester in your community, because that's where they grow. They feed off of you. They feed off of your energy. They feed off of your friends and your family. Don't let them in. Suss them out and get rid of them. It's really that simple. You don't have to have a long conversation about it. Report it to the mods. Let us suss it out if you're not sure 100%. If you've got receipts from somewhere else or whatever, throw them at us, that kind of thing. But this is going to be an always evolving conversation, and it's something that we have to remain constantly vigilant about. And it's unfortunate, and it is a lot of work, and it does take a lot of spoons, but that's why we're here. That's why I'm here. That's why Ocean's here, is to make sure that spaces like these are devoid of cancerous fascists. So, yeah,